He woke to the hiss of his own breath, a thin white ribbon unrolling from his lips and rising to meet the rafters. The air tasted of old wood and tallow, and beneath that, of iron and the faint bitter of ash. His skin remembered knives before his thoughts did. It remembered the cold that flooded him after and the quiet that was not quiet at all. A silent press the way deep snow swallows the world until even memory becomes a muffled thing. Jon lay very still. A plank overhead had a split running its length, a dark seam wandering like a river across an unmapped country. He had plenty of time to follow it. Time that did not rush him. Time that did not carry the scent of alarms or horns. Somewhere, beyond the shutters, winter spoke against the wall with a patient mouth. Wind worked itself into a narrow whistle and reversed again, and the wood answered with its own arthritic groan. He counted breaths, trusting the simple arithmetic of the living, making sure the numbers would not betray him. At last he lifted his hand. The sheet, rough, clean, frayed at the edge, fought his knuckles and then gave way. He blinked at it. His hand had not changed. Pale from cold and recovery, the knuckles marked with old scars. The crescent line where practice swords had bitten him as a boy. The faint scattering of burn marks from a winter long ago when he and his brothers had been careless around a brazier. Small proof of continuity. The hands of a bastard from Winterfell, nothing more. He flexed. Pain answered, not with the clarity of a cut but with a dull interior ache, as if the swords had buried themselves not in flesh but in the marrow of his bones. It was not a complaint so much as a reminder. He brought his palm to his ribs, feeling the packed bandages beneath the shirt someone had dressed him in. He could not say when that had happened. Images rose like flotsam. Davos's worried mouth and a beard gone grayer than he remembered. The red woman's eyes with their own private heat. The room crowded with breath and fear, specters crowded around the edges of lamplight and shadow. Ghost's head lifting as if he knew a tide had changed. Ghost. The thought fell through him and stirred the marrow pain again. He shifted, slow as melting ice, and turned his head. The door had been left on the latch. A line of dimness leaked under it as though the world outside were not light or dark but a third thing entirely. Before the door stood a shape he would have known in any world. The wolf's white silhouette thicker than the darkness around it. The soft press of paws alternating almost soundless when the animal shifted his weight. Two eyes watched him with an intelligence that did not ask permission to judge. Ghost, he managed, and his voice scraped as if it had been stored at the bottom of a dry well. His throat had learned each granule of the dust down there and brought them back to live in him. The wolf's head lifted, ears pricking. The tail made a slow, scything movement. Ghost's breath plumed. The musk of him slipped under the door's seam and met Jon halfway. He tasted the wild on it, old leagues of snow and pine sap, iron of blood, the clean nothing of wind on high ridges. Ghost's presence filled the room the way a calm fills a harbor. Jon's hand went to the side, uselessly reaching, then fell again. He could not hold that weight, not yet. It would come to him. Someone had set a cup on the stool beside the bed. From the halfway closed shutters, the winter light made a slab across it, a quiet coin of brightness on the table's scarred top. His arms did not belong to him, and yet he raised himself because it seemed impossible not to. The sheet fell away. Cold lived in the cusp of his elbow, in the triangle of his collarbone, in the notch where shoulder met chest. It did not harm him. It announced itself as if it had a right. He gathered breath as if it had to be harvested, as if breath grew under the floorboards and could be coaxed into the lungs by a patient hand. "Easy," said a voice from the corner. Davos wore his tiredness the way he wore his cloak, without complaint. The man had tucked himself so deeply into the shadow that at first Jon suspected he was dreaming the figure. "If you stand, you'll fall. If you fall, you'll split yourself open again, and I don't trust any man to sew you twice in the same week." Jon turned his head slowly. He could not quite make all the lines of Davos's face arrange themselves into an expression when they were so much occupied by worry. He tried to smile and then did not. It seemed a burden to ask his mouth to do two things when it had barely learned to do one. How? He began and then faltered on a truth too large to be carried by so small a word. Davos shook his head. "That's what you said when you were a boy, I imagine, when men told you about the world," he said softly. "How? And they never answered you properly because they didn't know. But you've breath now, my lord, and we'll be grateful for that first. Drink. It's only water. Water's an honest thing." Jon let Davos hold the cup for him because the older man's arms were solid and certain. The rim was cold against his mouth. He drank like a man scraping out a dry riverbed, hardly tasting it and grateful for the way it moved inside him, the way it made its own narrow roads. When he could not drink more, he let his head fall back and listened to the muscles complain. "It's a quiet morning," Davos added after a moment. "If the word quiet can be trusted at the wall, which I doubt. Tormund's men are in the lower yard trying to teach ours how to move like they have blood in them. Ed's keeping count of spears. We've a long list of things that should be instead of what they are. The Red Woman's gone to the Godswood, or what we call a Godswood." Jon's mouth tried the word. "Gods." Davos's lips pressed. "A man can believe in as many as will keep him alive," he said. "Or none at all and keep himself alive by stubbornness." The W, orled though. He let the thought drop, as men drop a stone into a deep well where there is no answering sound. Jon closed his eyes. The darkness behind his lids was crowded, not with images, not with the ghosts of his brothers and the blood on the snow, not even with the faces of the children he had sent south beyond the gate and trusted to the kindness of men whose kindness is a fickle dog. The darkness carried pressure. It was a hand laid on his forehead, his chest, and another hand laid just below that, as if measuring him. Not a human hand. Something broader and at once narrower, a grip too old to be anything but indifferent. He thought of frozen lakes that crack a day after you cross them. He thought of a hearth coal that looks dead until the breath finds it. "I was gone," he said to the darkness. "I was gone." Davos's hand settled on the bed's edge, fingertips at ease, unafraid. "You were, and now I'm here. You are. Some part of me is not. Then we'll find it and drag it back," Davos said, and his mouth might have been smiling, but it was the smile of a man making an oath to a winter road. Jon opened his eyes. The room was simple and sure of itself. The heavy shutters, the braided rope where someone had hung a rusted iron hook to hold a lantern, the floorboards flattened by hundreds of years of men in boots. On the table beside him lay his belt and the black cloak with its white ragged edge and the sword that had known other fathers before Jon. Longclaw waited with a loyalty that was not born but forged. He could feel its presence without touching it. The sword did not call to him. It regarded him as something to be weighed, a justice that would not shift beneath a man's feet for all his pleading. "Ghost," Jon said again, because names have weight and sometimes the saying of them is a way back to the world. The wolf came closer, his great head clearing the bed's height, breath washing Jon's shoulder with a warmth that spoke more of animal certainty than comfort. Ghost's nose touched the bandage at Jon's ribs and then lifted with a small huff, not quite annoyance, not quite approval. "Ed has a broth going," Davos said. "It tastes like wood and peppercorns that have lost their fight, but it's warm. You eat. Then we let you sit a while by the fire to remind your blood how to move." "I feel both cold and not," Jon said. The words were clumsy on his tongue. He did not know how to weight them, like standing too near a forge with snow sliding down my back. Davos regarded him with the care of a man measuring a spar to see if it will hold. "You feel how you feel," Davos answered, "and I won't pretend to wisdom and tell you what that means." Jon listened to his own breath until it became part of the room. In the pause between two heartbeats, he heard something else. Not a sound exactly, a sensation like the mind catching on a nail. In High Valyrian, a language he had never learned but which had once, long ago, been hammered into his bones by lied blood he had not been told about, there was a word for it. Aranyaka, the edge where blade becomes air. He did not know the word until he knew it, and then it sat in him as naturally as the taste of water. The pressure at his chest shifted a fraction. It was as if he stood in a doorframe, and on the sill dropped small grains of black gravel, a measure poured out for a god who had just been invited to sit down. He swallowed, and the air had a flavor. Ash, yes. Frost, yes. But something else too. A memory of scales rubbing against stone, of wings chafing the cold, empty sky. He did not see dragons, not as a vision that would convince any other man. He felt the shape of them as a pressure wave rolls ahead of a storm, the way wet sheets are snapped and the wind that leaps at you has a shape of its own. Jon looked at Davos. The older man met his gaze, steady as the bow of a ship that has seen worse seas. Davos did not ask him to explain. Davos offered him a piece of bread with a rough hand. Jon took it and tore it in half and ate like a man learning what hunger was. When the door opened a moment later without warning, the room's air changed again. It grew warmer by a small degree, but the warmth had a quality of presumption, as if it believed itself superior to any temperature the world might propose. Melisandre stepped in, her hair unbound, a shawl close around her shoulders, the red in her a quiet ember. She closed the door behind her as if she were closing a book. She stood and simply watched. Davos's mouth pulled down at one corner and then set itself to neutrality. "I'm not leaving," he said, in case the Red Woman thought to ask. "I would not ask it," she said. Her voice had lost something of its sureness. It was not uncertain. It was cautious, the way a flame leans when the draft shifts. Her eyes came to Jon's face and did not shy from the pallor there. "How do you fare, Lord Snow?" Jon had not much appetite for titles, but to argue the name she gave him would require him to be a man more rested, more in command of ways and words than he was. He met her gaze and said, "I am here," because it was what he had, and because even if he had possessed a library of words, he doubted any of them would do better. "You are," she said, and something like relief passed over her face and straightened it again. She moved to the foot of the bed, hands hidden in her shawl, and he felt the warmth that traveled with her. She had always carried it. Now it met the chill inside him and negotiated. He felt each clause of the negotiation as a burr in his blood. "When I went to the grove," she said, "I thought perhaps the old gods would resent my feet where their roots are. They have had so little to do with me but contempt. But the trees did not mind me. They did not welcome me either. They observed me. When I spoke to the heart tree, its face did not move. But the pools were not all ice. I do not belong to your god," Jon said. He did not essay. Wyatt with the sourness of a man who has chosen one god over another and must defend his choice. He said it the way a man might say, "I do not belong to winter or summer or the river or the mountain, because all of those have a say in me but none claim me wholly." Melisandre's smile did not quite form before it escaped. "No," she said, "you are a thing I do not know, and I have known many things. Be careful with what you do not know," Davos said. She glanced at him, not offended. "What else is there to be careful with? The things we know defend themselves." She returned to Jon. "You died with knives in you. You returned with knives in you. This is not metaphor. I can feel them where the flesh is healed. Narrow, bright. They are not steel and they do not cut. They are..." She tilted her head, seeking, and the pearl at her throat regarded him without blinking. "They are the points where the world was sutured to let you through." "You say that as if I have been born again," Jon said. The words made his stomach turn slightly, as if he had eaten too fast. "You have." She did not make ceremony out of it. "But your birth was not a thing done entirely by my god. There was a light, yes. There was heat. And there was another thing with it that I have only felt when I have stood too near the wall and said to myself, 'Step back now, step back, or you will be less.' I know what the wall is. Any man who has eyes knows. But what is it precisely?" She looked as though she would have liked to wear a question across her brow like a diadem, and found her own hand unworthy to place it there. "I am listening to you to know. I am listening to me to know," Jon answered. Ghost's head came around sharply, ears tense. The wolf lifted his nose to the boards as if scent came up from the cellar and not down from the seam in the door. Jon felt the change before he heard it. The air grew thin around his mouth as if greedy lungs elsewhere were drinking from the same room. Then came the footfalls in the corridor. hasty, unbalanced, the sound of a man who would have run faster if he could but understood that the world is slippery and wants to throw you. The door opened before even a knock could pretend to warn them. Ed Tollett was the shape in the threshold, his hair a thatch that had been convinced by wind and nothing else to lie in a direction. He managed respect and urgency in the same bow. "Begging your pardon for the ease of my manners," he said, "but I thought it unwise to place courtesy ahead of the small matter of men gathering at the gate who say they belong to you." John did not know how to stand until he was standing. The bed dipped under the weight he took off it. The floor met his feet like a hand. Ghost slid away from him and then back again, not so much anxious as attentive. Davos rose to protest, then thought better of it and instead placed his shoulder near John, as if he were a wall convenient for leaning against. Melisandre moved half a pace aside and watched as he found his height. "Men?" John asked, and his voice accepted itself again, coming back from the walls without a rasp. "Wildlings, 100 at least. And a girl with them who says she knows you, even though I would have sworn I knew the lot of your acquaintances and none fits her description. If there's another long night at the door, my lord, perhaps close it while we still have a candle." John breathed. The cold in him lifted like a flock. It did not leave. It resettled somewhere else, somewhere he would come to know in time. "Bring them to the yard," he said. He tugged his shirt straight, though it did not need it, and found the cloak more by habit than by comfort. The fur's weight was what he remembered. Its smell turned him briefly toward a hall he had known in childhood, to voices that would never again make warmth for him from within their bodies. When he fastened the clasp, the iron of it bit well. It was a bite he trusted. He looked to Longclaw. The sword set its argument aside and let him take it. Felt proper at his hip, solemn, not eager. Davos did not say, "This is foolish." He took a place by John with the quiet available to a man who has outlived his belief several times and still knows what a duty is. Melisandre followed them not in the way of a priest attending her creation, but as a witness to a river that has for the first time found a different bed. Ed was a pace ahead, moving with that peculiar grace he had, one part resignation, one part persistence, as if he had learned to make a speed out of compromise. The corridors of Castle Black held onto cold and memory with the same stubbornness. John could name where the boards would creak and where damp would lift and leave a darker mark. He loved the place the way a man loves the scar that tells him who he's been without flattering him for it. He caught, as they turned the corner, the smell of stew gone to gruel, and felt a wave of tenderness toward the men whose hunger would make even that taste like relief. In the yard, the light had swung toward winter's pallor, but it had not yet made noon out of morning. Men stood in a half-ring and tried to look like they had been standing that way the whole time, as if to admit surprise would tempt the world to give them more of it. John stepped out. The men in the ring saw him and reacted by becoming too still. They did not cheer. They breathed as if the air had developed a flavor they had to identify before swallowing. Tormund strode forward long before any other soul had decided whether to believe what they were seeing. He was a banner made of muscle and tangled hair, happiness and weather. "Crow," he said in a voice that would have slapped warmth into the air simply by being made. Then his grin grew wider than the yard. "I could smell your stubbornness from 2 leagues out. If you had stayed dead, I would have dragged you back by your toes. The wall owes me a bet." John found himself smiling. It was easier than he had thought. "You low. Okay, worse," he said, because the world had to be placed back on its feet somehow. Tormund laughed. He grabbed John's forearms and pressed their bodies together in a hug that took a liberty with the living and the dead alike. For a moment, John expected to hurt simply from being a person where knives had been, but the pain did not leap up as he had feared. It spoke in a low voice, reminding him, but let him be embraced. He became conscious of other eyes as they drew apart. 100 and more, wary, curious, and the one pair Ed had mentioned. The girl stood beside a tall older man with a face like a pared-down tree. Stringy, sure, but she outpaced the yard with her presence. She wore a hood thrown back despite the wind. The hair beneath it was the color of the red leaves that remained on a hardy birch after first snow. She had a longbow strung across her back and scars on her knuckles that had been earned and not invited. When John's gaze met hers, the pressure in his chest flickered. The girl did not blink. She was not beautiful in a way that would have made any courtier sing. She would, if given a choice, have stabbed a song and gone on to the next thing. But her face had the radiance of someone entirely true to their own edges. "You died," she said, as if picking up an old conversation interrupted by Winters. And for a beat the hush took on a thickness like fat thrown into a cold pan. Every man present was waiting to see how those two words would be received. "I did," John said. "And now you aren't. And now I'm not." That exchange seemed to satisfy her. She moved her shoulders as if easing out stiffness from a long trek and then took a step forward. The older man beside her also moved, a half step, barely discernible, as if the habit of guarding someone was a thing you could not set down no matter how many times the person you guarded proved they did not need it. "I have something that belongs to you," the girl said. She came nearer without haste. Ghost's head lowered, ears up, not hostile, curious. She reached inside her jerkin with no theatricality and drew out a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. Water beaded on it where snow had kissed and been turned away. She offered it with both hands. "I closed my fingers on it in a cave of glass and salt because otherwise the sea would take it. I did not know who it belonged to until a tree told me." The men of the watch did not shift. The wind made a small movement in the pack of them, as though to remind the crowd that it could traverse them whenever it pleased. John took the bundle. It was not heavy. It had a concentrated weight, like a thought that refuses to be dismissed. "Open it," she said. She was not impertinent. She was sure. When his fingers hesitated at the knot, her mouth turned the slightest degree, not impatience, something like tenderness. "Sometimes the things that cut us also want to be held," she said in a voice that almost did not carry beyond his cloak. He undid the knot. The oilcloth gave way with the forlorn sigh of a thing that has done its duty and outlived it. Inside lay a length of metal no longer than his forearm and no broader than the span of 3 fingers. It had been struck into the shape of a narrow, blunt-edged rod with markings etched along its length that were neither letters nor numerals he recognized. The metal was not steel. It did not gleam. It had a soft depth as if every surface led to another surface within. The moment the cold air touched it, a subtle steam rose from the etched lines. Not smoke, not frost. The rod did not feel cold or hot in his hands. It felt like the difference between two weathers met inside the same sky. "What is it?" Davos asked at his shoulder, low and ready to call it a curse if he must. "I think I know," Melisandre said softly. She did not reach for it. She knew to keep her hands back from a thing that might not respect them. "But if I say it and am wrong, the word will make it less. Let him tell us by holding it." John did not know how to hold it until he held it precisely correctly. He slid his right hand along its smoothness until his fingers found a shallow groove, and his left hand made a brace without being taught. At the point where the two hands met the metal, an understanding passed between them, between hands and rod, between the man and the thing not made for men. It was not a weapon in any way he knew, but the air shifted around it with the same focus the yard took when a man draws a sword to practice. Not to kill, but to speak the language of killing. Something moved across his skin, an old sentence finding a mouth that never knew it had been shaped to say it. "Draget," John whispered, and did not know until he had said the word that it meant bind or be bound. The thing in his hands sang. Not a sound that any man could put to a tune, not music. A vibration that made the hair on his arms stand up and the breath of every man present float more white. Ghost's hackles rose by a fraction, not fear but recognition. "Valyrian," Melisandre said so soft that it might have been only her breath. John kept his eyes on the rod. The etched lines darkened, then brightened as though some invisible smith worked the metal from inside. He did not feel heat. He felt his heart giving up a portion of itself to a different rhythm and then taking the foreign rhythm in exchange. The pressure at his chest, the sutured points Melisandre had named, shifted once more. The stitches did not tear. They strengthened. The cold inside him lifted again, higher this time, and spread like the fan of a bird's tail before it lands. The warmth that had camped around his bones moved too, rising to meet the cold in a species of greeting. He had known, and not known, all his life that he belonged to two houses. It had been given names by others: Stark, Snow, Bastard, and more names: Targaryen, Dragon, Fire, had been the subject of whispers, gossip as strong and as flimsy as smoke. He had not welcomed any of those names. They were banners under which wars were fought by men who had forgotten what they loved before they learned what they hated. Now the truth of him did not ask to be believed by a world that loved banners. It announced itself to his blood. Fire, two matters that do not meet without catastrophe. And yet, here in his hands, the rod held them both. It was not a rod, he realized. In some older manner of making, it had been part of a gate. The hinge, perhaps, the central piece upon which two massive doors had once swung. Doors made of stone and fire and something colder than stone. A gate built where no men lived anymore. Founded and then lost. What does it want? Tormund asked, not because he thought such a thing would want anything, but because he could not imagine bringing a thing like this into the yard and not giving it a chance to declare itself. An oath? Jon said, not knowing why he knew it. Only that the word stepped out into the cold and stood solid on it, the way men sometimes do when the ice is too thin for sense and yet holds anyway. It wants a word that will be kept. It was made for a word. A key, the red-haired girl said. She seemed pleased. It opened me a passage when the sea had shut its mouth. I told it my name and could pass. But it did not open for the others. What is your name? Jon asked, because names were a way to make anything human. Nyra, she said, and for a moment her face held something unguarded. And I owe my life to a tree that did not owe me anything. In the south, Ed muttered. They would call this magic and set fire to the first thing that would burn fastest. Up here we call it the weather and see what it blows in. Jon squeezed the knot rod, the hinge, the key, and felt briefly an urge to hold it to his mouth and bite, to confirm its reality the way a child confirms the reality of hard candy. He did not. He turned it so that the etched lines faced the wall. The key's hum answered the wall's silence. The answer was not a direct noise. It was the sensation of standing a few feet from an animal so enormous that your mind made a picture of a hill. The wall looked like a wall. The wall had always looked like a wall. But with the key in his hands, it appeared as a living thing wearing an immobilized skin. Magic, if that was the word to use, had been pumped into it by hands that had not needed languages like his. The key did not wish to unlock the wall. It wished to speak to it. The wall declined to speak back in any tongue humans could hear, but it shifted, took notice. He felt it across his palms like the bass line of a drum. Later, he told it softly, and the key subsided as if content. It was not in a hurry. It had survived longer than the older man's oldest story. It would survive longer still. It did not recognize impatience. It recognized the kind of determination that erodes mountains by existing in one place for a very long time. It recognized oaths. Jon slid it back into its oilskin and bound the knot with fingers he was surprised to find steady. When he lifted his eyes, the yard seemed fuller than it had before. "Welcome," he told Nyra and the men and women behind her. They did not look like southern refugees. They looked like the people the North made when the North needed to make men and women who could not be broken by anything but a god's hand. Faces seamed by wind and want. Hands thickened by work that could not be postponed for weather or sorrow. They were not angry. They were tired in a way that could become anger easily if asked. "There is food enough, if not food fine. We will find bunks. We will find you wool and a place to warm your hands. If any man denies you these things because he is afraid, tell me." "Aye," Tormund approved. "And if any man denies you because he is stupid, tell me. I'll sort stupidity with a long stick and a short patience." That raised a few smiles, which were a kind of payment in this yard that had seen too many currencies debased. The crowd loosened. Nyra fell in beside Jon without permission and without insolence. Davos gave her a brief look, measuring, then shrugged as men shrug when they have learned to think like the sea. Everything that can be on a deck will be on the deck soon enough. Melisandre watched Nyra as if the girl had entered her view by mistake and then decided to stay. "Where did you find it?" Jon asked Nyra as they walked toward the steps to the keep. He did not look at her directly. He watched her from the edges the way you watch a hawk to judge if it is hunting or merely making a shape against the sky. "Among black pillars the water makes a sound like teeth," she said. "The island is sometimes an island and sometimes not. The caves go down and down. Men who do not love the dark should not go. I do not love the dark and went anyway. A man with me fell into a hole that did not return sound. I called and the hole did not answer. I could not leave him where the silence was the only company, so I went to find a different path. There was a chamber with a roof like glass and a floor like glass, and the water was above and below both. The thing you hold was at the center. I touched it and the water stopped arguing. There was a word in my head. Draugr, Jon said. Nyra's head came around, quick and alert. She looked at him as though he had taken off a mask he had not realized he was wearing. "Yes, I don't speak that language. The trees speak it when they think no one is listening." "You listen," Jon said. She made a small, unworried face. "Ido." She glanced up at the wall. "This holds the sky back. That is what men say. And it holds something else back," Melisandre added. "Cold that is not merely weather. Death that is not simply an end." She was careful with her words. She did not like to make pronouncements since the last time a pronouncement had broken in her hands like a brittle toy. Nyra's gaze slid to Melisandre with a tiny distance in it. "Fire woman," she said without malice, naming what she saw. Melisandre inclined her head. "And you are a leaf on a young branch," she said, a note of something like respect in her voice. "The sap speaks through you without permission. That is a burden." Nyra's hand went to the scars on her knuckles. Her fingers folded as if remembering the weight of a rock. "I would carry heavier if it meant my people slept with a roof that did not float away in spring." Jon listened. The yard had a new frequency now. Some part of him had been tuned to it without his will. He did not know what he had become except that it was not what he had been. He had been a man who made decisions under banners he distrusted. A man who tried to be fair in a world that punished the fair for being seen. He had died for a truth that would not show itself to those who had not yet paid enough to see it. Now he had been given back his breath by forces that had no interest in fairness. He could either become their instrument or make himself something else entirely. They reached the steps. He paused, set his hand on the stone. Cold traveled up his palm and then down again, as if recognizing something in him that had been a stranger before. Nyra inclined her head toward the inner door. "We'll put you by the west wall," Ed was announcing to the wildlings, his voice carrying. "Because when the wind blows from the east, and it will, you'll be grateful every stone is between your ears and it. Keep the children off the ladders unless you want them to grow into arrows. If you steal from the kitchens, steal in groups so at least you can share the blame fairly." There was a low ripple from the crowd that could have turned into laughter if the world were a kinder world. Jon climbed. In the main hall, the fire had been coaxed toward cheerfulness by whoever the morning duty was. The flames considered being friendly and decided it was as good a time as any. Jon settled on the bench near the heat and lifted his hands to it. For a breath, he expected to feel one side of him simply warm while the other remained itself. But the sensation did not split along some neat seam. Warmth and cold entered him and found their levels like two springs feeding the same pool. He could track them. He could track the path warmth took in the convolutions of his body, and the path cold took too. It was not unpleasant. It was informative, like discovering a series of roads on a map you thought you knew. He did not know he had closed his eyes until he opened them and found there were bowls in front of him. The color of them held a faint ghost of carrots. Davos pushed a spoon toward his hand. He obeyed because at some fundamental level he believed in Davos's sense of what a morning required. The broth was as promised. Simple, honest, giving you what it had without apology for what it did not have. The bread was better if only because it fought the teeth a little. He ate until the bowl had done its work and then sat with his hands open to the fire and let the heat write its story on his skin. What does a man owe the world after it's given him back what he had finished with? Davos asked, not as a trial, not as a test, just as a thing his mind could not help setting down between them. I owe the men who followed me and were killed because of me. I owe the men who killed me. I owe their fear not to make it kill others. I owe the dead the courtesy of making my life matter if I can. Davos considered that. You always did talk like a ledger when things grew heavy, he said. But you're not wrong. Owing and being owed, these are what build a day. That rod, he nodded toward the wrapped bundle, wants something that is not a debt. It wants a promise. A promise doesn't add up the way a ledger does. If you keep it, it is more than the sum. If you break it, you break something that you cannot replace with anything you have. Jon accepted that into the account book of his mind. I don't know what oath it wants. Then don't give it one yet, Davos said. You were always too quick to pledge yourself to the hardest road on the table. There's wisdom in letting a road show you its stones before you commit your feet to bleeding on them. Nyra had taken a position a few steps away, wolf close but not crowding. She studied the fire openly, without the flinching superstition that kept some men from watching flame as if it could watch them back. Melisandre watched Nyra watching, and in that triangle Jon felt the faintest thread drawn between trees and fire. He had never thought he would be the knot in such a thread. Outside, men moved in patterns, the inexpert slopes of new drills, the testing of bows, the shaping of spear shafts. Ed barked a word here and there like a man calling to a lazy dog who doesn't belong to him and knows it. Tormund's laugh came through the door as something like a bomb. Even the timbers seemed to know they had been asked to bear foolishness as well as fear. We will be attacked, Melisandre said to the fire. I see it not as vision but as the natural end to the road we have all set our boots upon. The dead do not rest. They collect interest. They won't come now, Jon said, his eyes unfocused, seeing something other than the hall. Not today. The cold isn't right for them. The wind is wrong. They march but not with the speed fear would give them. They gather. They count. Count? Davos asked. It isn't number. It's a kind of counting that isn't arithmetic. Jon struggled with the grip of the notion. They count not how many they have, but how much of us remains uncounted. They want all the ways there are to be human, and they want to make them one way only, their way. They're patient because they can afford to be. They believe time is theirs. And do you agree? Melisandre asked. Eyes bright with a worry, she tried not to valorize by calling it prophecy. No, Jon said, and the cold in him answered that with a clear, quiet assent, and the heat aye. And him did too, though with a different timbre. They both reached a rare accord. Time is not theirs. Time is a thing that lives in the gap between fire and ice, in the compromise where water decides whether to be liquid or stone. Time belongs to hesitation, to the moment when a man decides not to kill, to the moment when he decides he must. They don't have that. They don't hesitate. Davos breathed out. I liked you better when you were a man who coughed and shivered and made bad decisions like the rest of us, he said, not unkindly. Jon looked at his hands. He did not want to float out of himself into the comfortable cloud of being something other men could not name or reach. He wanted to be a man who could be held by the shoulder when the world tilted. Hold me to being human, he said to Davos, and meant it. I will, my lord, Davos said, though I suspect it will be like holding a rope tied to a ship that has half a mind to be a storm. Footsteps approached, punctilious ones, the kind that never learned to hurry because they believed that by the same punctual rhythm they could force the world to organize itself around them. Bowen Marsh's ghost was not in those steps. The man dead by Jon's own order, no, he would not think that now. He looked up, braced for one kind of duty, and then relaxing by a degree when he saw instead Maester Aemon's memory carried in another body. But of course Aemon was gone, and the man in the doorway was a boy, one with ink on his fingers and a face earnest enough to break if mishandled. The Maester they had now was not yet everything his chain weighed him to be. Lord Commander, the boy said before checking himself with a jerk that might have been an apology to the dead and to the living both. Forgive me, John. A raven. Davos's eyebrows marked a high line on his forehead. The world chooses moments, he muttered. The boy stepped forward, careful not to meet the red woman's eyes the way men avoid looking into a hearth too long. He proffered the tube. John took it and worked the wax with his nail. He recognized the seal. A heavy thing formed in his belly that was not dread, not relief. He pulled the square of bone-white parchment free. The words were plain as bread, straightforward in their forms and heavy in their duty. Winterfell, a sigil unfurled, a name in the bottom as sure as it was impossible. He did not say it aloud. He read, and in reading, felt the key in his lap answer the shape of the words the way a tuning fork answers a note struck on steel. He saw in his mind a hall where once he had eaten stew too hot and had been chastised not for impatience but for a lack of grace. He saw the old stone and the weirwood in the godswood whose face was singularly its own. He saw a girl with hair the color of chestnuts laughing in the yard and a woman whose quiet had been mistaken for softness. He saw a father whose honor had been a map to a country John had never been allowed to enter. He saw all that and then set the raven's words carefully on the bench beside him as if they could burn or freeze if mishandled. From the south, Davos asked, tone prepared to discount any claim until proven by discomfort. From home, John said. The word felt dangerous on his tongue. Or from the place which says, it is my home. They ask for aid. They say the banners will be called, and that I am counted among them whether I wish to be or not. This is convenient, Ed observed, who had slipped in behind the maester as if carried by the draft. Men who hated you yesterday remember your name when there is soup to be had from it. I would say it is also a trap, Melisandre told the memory of the flames. It is the sort of rope the South throws north, the kind that is meant to look like rescue and is instead a noose tied nicely enough to pass inspection. Nyra tilted her head and considered the idea as if it were a bird she might bring down from a branch. If the rope is there, she said, and we are on a cliff, then perhaps we use it anyway with a knife between our teeth. John sat with the paper's weight living in the table beside him and felt the two principles within him consider the question. The cold said, consider only what lasts. The heat said, consider only what lives. He found the place between. We do both, he said. We hold the wall. We move toward Winterfell. Not because the lords ask it, because the north is a woven thing, a net that holds what we are. If one knot breaks, the whole thing becomes less certain. We cannot afford to be less certain. Not now. And who becomes Lord Commander while you go playing knots? Ed inquired dryly. I will not wear the cloak. It itches where a man cannot scratch, and it comes with more ghosts than it sits comfortable with. You, John said, for a while. Ed blinked with the slow, despairing patience of a mule asked to learn music. I hate this. I hope you know I hate this the way a man hates a stone in his boot that is also his boot. I know, John said and smiled. Felt less difficult each time. They set to the work of a day as men do, by carving it into the size of the hands they have. Spear counts, ration counts, Tormund measuring the will of men who had learned to hide from their own courage and showing them where it had gone. Nyra and her company being tucked into empty spaces like new bones into a cage, making the place more itself rather than less. Melisandre slipping away when the light had tilted, taking her heat with her, leaving behind a slight impression of something that had once sat in a chair and considered the shape of mortality. Davos finding the quiet jobs that were not glamorous and doing them with a competence that did not ask to be praised. Ghost meantime drifted through the castle like a rumor, appearing where men forgot that anything pure could live at the edge of the world and reminding them it could. When dusk came early as it always came here, John stood a time alone on the top of the wall, the world around him iron and pale. He set his hands on the ice and felt under both palms the old power living there like an animal asleep with one eye open. Snow fell in the manner of snow that has traveled a long road, wearily, each flake a pilgrim with a story that will be forgotten as soon as it touches ground. He looked out to the forest, to the miles of black trunks and the spaces between them, to the long rolling as far as any eye could be asked to see. The dead were out there, somewhere assembling themselves into the idea of a nation. He could feel their counting. They counted and never got to the end of it because they did not know how to stop. He took the wrapped key from inside his cloak. He did not unwrap it. He stood with it in his hand like a man who has promised a ring and is waiting to know the right moment to give it. He breathed, and his breath hung in front of him, and for a blink his breath did not disperse. It held itself in a shape, a thing like a curl of script, a letter he almost recognized. Valyrian. The breath wrote the letter, and then the wind took it and tore it apart. He laughed once, short, surprised at himself for the joy the sight gave him. To be alive and see a thing like that. It was more than a ledger entry, more than a debt or even a promise. It was a gift as brief as breath. "Father," he said into the air that would not hold his words any better than it held his breath. "If you are out there beyond whatever I understand, forgive me for borrowing the world a while longer. I'll be careful with it. I'll try." He felt no answer any man would accept. He felt a kindness. It could have been the north wind deciding to turn its face for a heartbeat. It could have been his own ache becoming bearable by growing accustomed to its own shape. He let the possibility be enough. "Lord Commander." Ed's voice came like a reminder that the world continues even when the soul would like to stand still under snow and be a tree. "The stew is as poor as ever. I advise eating now when you've hope enough to pretend it's not." John smiled into the weather. "Coming," he said, turning his back to the forest with the deliberate courage it takes to present your spine to something you fear. He tucked the key away and walked the boards, feeling the wall beneath him wake a fraction and watch him pass. Not unfriendly, not friendly, simply aware. As if between them there was a conversation that had been going on for centuries and that would continue whether men listened or not. He slept that night as one sleeps lightly in a house that owns ghosts. Dreams came, not as speeches nor as vivid tableaus that would encourage men to set out on heroic errands. They came as sensations kept just out of comprehension. Heat under ice, the taste of copper, the sound of a wing beat that does not displace air but causes it to tighten. A tree's roots feeling the first laziness of thaw. In one dream he stood again in the glass-roofed chamber Nyra had described and watched water decide, in infinite slowness, whether to fall. The key lay before him, its etchings bright as a forge. He reached and the key retreated, not to deny him, but to insist that he come as he was, not as something else he imagined himself to be. He woke with tears in his eyes and could not say whether they had been caused by sorrow or relief. At dawn a raven came again, this one with no seal, a messy scrap with a cramped hand. The message was a rumor dressed up as a demand. The South wanted the North to be part of what it wanted, and the North wanted the South to stop speaking to it as though the North remained a child in need of instruction. John ate bread and listened to the scrape of a knife on a whetstone and felt the day growing its work around him. Orders went out, not the sort that would thrill any minstrel. Not yet. Some men would go to Molestown to bring up what had been buried there when the last of its brave souls had been lost to fear and to cruelty. Others would ride to gather the remnants of houses broken and binding themselves together with reeds and stubbornness. The older women who knew the seasons better than any map and the boys who had become too thin to be called boys. John would send letters north and south, words shaped to say what he meant, and what he meant would not once call anyone his lord unless the word was earned. Ed would count every boot and make a note of every man who insisted on going barefoot to pretend the cold did not own him. Davos would speak to the men whose despair had made them simple-minded and remind them that simplicity has its own courage. Tormund would find a drinking horn and fill it with something that might once have been good and might again be good if warmed, and thereby demonstrate to the lot of them that joy refuses to be extinguished even when rationality demands it. Nyra asked no place in any hierarchy. She moved through the keep like a draft that knew which doors were badly hung. Sometimes she spoke to a tree. Sometimes she spoke to a stone. When men watched, she did it with her mouth closed so as not to invite judgment. When she knew she was unobserved, she let sound out, not a song, not words, but something like the sound snow makes when you rub two handfuls together. And Melisandre. She stood in the godswood that was not a southern godswood and placed her hands on the rough bark and did not flinch when the sap's cold refused her and did not preen when it tolerated her. She whispered names, not of her god, of the things men love and fear and make into gods when they cannot bear to think of them as only themselves. Flame, shadow, dawn, mercy. The words had their own heat. The tree did not answer except by continuing to be the one thing in all the world that had no interest in lies. Days passed measured in the currency of small accomplishments. Men who had not believed in anything found themselves believing in certain movements of the hand, certain timings of the shoulder, ways the blade might be held that would save the life which held it. The wildlings taught the crows to move like men who had learned to eat hunger and spit back strength. The crow taught the wildling the discipline that let strength be more than a shout. Laughter grew, not loud, not even warm at first, but real. When a pot broke, men did not curse the pot. They cursed the winter and then went to find another pot. When a horse went lame, someone who loved horses did not say so in any flowery manner. He put his hands on the fetlock and told the animal the same unreasonable lies all men tell wounded beasts, that the hurt will pass, that a good horse will not be made into glue, that the spring will come. In the odd hours between work and exhaustion, John sat with the key unwrapped. He learned it the way men learn the faces of those they love, by diligence, by patience, by repetition rather than by genius or sudden insight. He did not coax it to do anything. He let it tell him what it had already been built to do. It was a hinge, a balance, could shift an unbearable weight with a whisper. It would do so only when spoken to in a language that commanded it by making a promise. Its lines were not writing in the way men write, words leaning on their sticks and stones to become letters. Its lines were a score, a song written in a notation the dragons had once known. The key had been made by hands not exactly like human hands. It had been cooled not in water but in air of a particular thinness, in caves where the raw world still breathed slowly. "Will you keep it?" Davos asked when the two of them sat in an alcove where the wind found them every other minute and forgot again. "Or will you give it into someone else's keeping? The red woman, the girl, the wall." "I'll keep it," John said, and a shiver ran through him that had nothing to do with cold. "Not because it belongs to me. I don't think it belongs. Travels. I'll hold it until I find where its hand ought to rest next." "You sounded like a lord for a moment," Davos observed. "I never wanted that." "Most of the good ones don't," Davos said. The night before he meant to send out his first rider south, John stood again on the wall. The sky had pulled itself taut. Stars looked closer than they had any right to be. He could have reached up and plucked one and cut his mouth on it. It was so sharp with cold. He felt, in the dried sap stillness, a pressure different from the wall's old breath. It came from far beyond, where the woods ended not in a line men could draw but in a thinning of definitions. The dead were moving, not marching as drums would have you imagine. They slid where the wind slid. They rearranged themselves around obstacles the way water does. They did not hesitate, counting, always counting. He rested his palm on the ice as one might rest a hand on a sick child's brow to measure fever. The wall hummed, low, irritated. The rumble of a great creature woken too early and reminded of its purpose before the right morning. "Soon," John told it, and knew the word was too brief for what he meant. He had no desire to unlock the wall. He had a desire to let it know it was not alone. The key answered him like a cat turning its head at a sound in another room. "Talk often to yourself and to the things that don't respond," Ed said at his elbow, making John jump. "It will keep you sane in a way that looks like madness, which is how sanity does when there are no good roads to it. You'd best take care you're not pushed into the role of a sage," John told him dryly. "You aren't suited to it, and it would kill you quicker than winter." "I was born a sage," Ed said in a tone so defeated it made John grin. "And winter is already chewing my toes." He slept little after that, less from fear than from a kind of excitement that a man does not admit to near the wall. It is not the done thing to sit with hope in this place. Men resent it. It suggests spring, and those who have not yet been hurt by hope will be. and those who have will not forgive its insistence upon returning to the table. Jon felt it anyway, in the way his limbs held him a little more readily, in the way Ghost's coat shone a little more sharply in even bad light, in the way the tree in the gods' wood had been dusted with new snow and did not look oppressed by it. When dawn put its thumb on the world to lift it again, the yard filled with what morning always brought here: breath, noise, motion, timid jokes, braced shoulders. Jon mounted and let his horse blow steam into his knees. Men waited for him to say the sort of words that make men into more than themselves. He did not. He told them instead the smaller truths most men can hold. There are people to bring in who have not yet chosen a banner because they've had to choose between firewood and food, he said. Bring them. There are those who think we will not shield them because they did not love us when we needed loving. Show them they are wrong. There are watchtowers that stand idle when they must be lit. Light them. There are men who will look at you and try to take anything not tied down because they fear the dark. Tie down what cannot be spared. Let them take what will do them more good than us. It was not stirring, but the men looked settled by it as a field settles under frost. He watched them ride out in groups of 3 and 4. He sent Davos north with Tormund to bring a particular set of families he remembered from one grim spring, and to let Davos learn a few things about what men become when their map does not include a place to stand. He kept Ed where he was. He did not explain himself when Ed looked as though he wanted to protest. Nyra did not ask to ride with any of the parties. She drifted to the gate and sat on the sill with one leg out and one leg tucked up, as if listening to a story the world had begun long before she was born. Jon stopped near her with a sense as definite as a hand placed on his shoulder. "Come with me," he heard himself say, as if his voice had been used for someone else's sentence. He heard the rightness of the words after they were out. "There's a place." She rose like a door opening inward. "Under the ice?" she asked, and he nodded. "Into the ice," she corrected softly, and he nodded again. They did not take many men. Just enough that Ed would not regard it as one more instance of his superior taking foolish risks. Just few enough that they could move as water moves among rocks. They carried rope and spikes, an old lantern with glass clean enough to punch a clean hole in the dark, food wrapped in oiled leather, a coil of stubbornness that Jon found had been provided by the wall without being requested. Melisandre did not join them, though Jon felt the red of her watching them. Not from a window, but from the place in the world where warmth hides and waits. The steps down to the cellars had been cleared long ago and cleared again since. They smelled of damp stone and old salt and the memory of pickled meat. There were caverns men knew and caverns only maps remembered. Jon led them below that, to places where a light could be seen moving in the hand of a man at such a distance that you would think it a cold star. He did not know the way until he knew it. The key guided him not by pulling but by drawing his attention to the right corner, the less used path, the rock that had the smooth shine only hands give. The air grew thinner and colder, and then, in a strangest of reversals, warmer, the earth's own warmth gathering around ankles, creeping up calves. It was not pleasant. It reminded the body of fever and of the bed you were too weak to escape. He stopped before a door that was not a door. Stone had cracked in a way that suggested it had once been a decision. The crack had edges like teeth. Water had been here once and had left. He did not touch the key to it. He put his hand against the rock and waited. There is an argument men have with stone that involves hammers and wedges and swearing. There is another argument that involves waiting until the stone becomes bored with ignoring you. He waited. Nyra waited as easily as he did, as if no use could be made of impatience in this place. The men behind them shifted and did not complain as loudly as they could have. When the crack widened, it did so as if it had been convinced not by force but by flattery. Jon slid through sideways and was swallowed by a space that could not exist under the wall if men were to be believed. Light wavered from the lantern and then steadied as the one who held it remembered that hands can be taught anything. The chamber opened, height impossible to guess. Rivulets of water catching the lantern's breath and whispering it to one another. The floor, yes, like glass. No, not like glass. The ice was so old it had become an idea of itself. The ceiling likewise. Between them ran a thickness of air that tasted of a language older than pine. The key took itself out of John's hands so delicately that at first he thought he had merely dropped it. It hovered there, not higher than a man's head. It turned once, twice, the etchings taking up the lantern's poor light and turning it into something else. Not brighter, truer. He stood absolutely still, not because he feared to scare it, but because he reasoned that stillness was the language of the room. The hinge stopped. It oriented itself toward something in the ice that even his eyes could not be made to see. Then, in the smallest, rudest of sounds, a crack whispered across the floor. It did not break anything. It simply informed the room that it now had a seam. Naira made a sound in her throat that might have been a child's delight at finding a frog. The men behind them each took a step, one forward and one back at the same time. The key did not move again. John realized it was listening to something that no human ear could perceive. He felt the sutures in his chest go warm and then cold, then the reverse. Ice and fire arrived at an accord that felt like forgiveness. "What is it?" one of the men blurted at last, because it is a human thing to make a question when a thing has become too much to bear without talking. His voice did not echo, which unnerved him more than the thing itself. "What are we seeing?" John said, "A gate," and the room did not disagree. "A gate built for what we do not know. A gate that thinks. A gate that learns the shape of those who come to it. It is not ours, but we have been given time with it." "By who?" the man asked. "By what remains of the old agreements," Melisandre said from the doorway, and John did not startle at her voice only because he had already learned that where heat goes, she may go also. This was made when men were frightened in a way we have forgotten how to be. Frightened intelligently. Frightened into making something better than their fear. It is perhaps the only thing the Valyrians made that was not arrogant. "Valyrian?" the man breathed, making the word into something he was not sure he should put on his tongue. "Yes," she said, and her mouth shaped the syllables with a care that was not reverence but accuracy. "Made of their science and of the wild's own will." Her eyes went to John. "You are behaving as if you have heard a voice call you by a name you did not know you owned." "I have," he said simply. "What name?" Naira asked, quick and eager in the way honest curiosity makes a face open. John hesitated. It was not modesty. It was the sense that a word once said might force itself into a work before the work was ready. Then he said it in the other language, the one that had found his blood. "Paletus." He let the syllables travel through him. "A binder and a joining. A god made not by worship but by balance." Melisandre's lips parted. She actually looked vulnerable for a heartbeat, as if something had been offered to her personally and she did not know whether to accept. "Do you know, what you were saying?" she asked, not suspicious, fearful. "If you call yourself that, you will be asked to keep that name. You will be asked to be justice along a line that is not level." "I don't call myself it," John said. "I repeat what something has whispered to the part of me that hears language other men cannot. I do not want godhood." His mouth twisted with bitterness. "The gods I have seen are poor at pity." "Then be better," Naira said, with the vicious innocence of youth. "Call yourself what you are, and then be better than the word." "Word's own," Davos muttered, who had come down in the end because his sense of duty was a chain he could not break. "But if you're to be owned, better by balance than by any king's whim." John reached out his hand. The key returned to him with such obedience that it embarrassed him. He did not feel worthy of being greeted so easily by an ancient thing. He thought of the wall, of Winterfell's raven, of the dead counting, of Davos's loyalty, of Ed's resigned wisdom, of Tormund's laughter, of Naira's frankness, of Melisandre's dangerous sincerity. If he were to be called, if he were to accept a calling, the only answer he could make was a promise to them all. "Then this is the oath," he said quietly, speaking to the key not as to an object but as to an old ally rediscovered. He spoke in the old language because the room demanded it. The words came without struggle and did not hurry. "I will not be one thing when two are needed. I will be bridge and river both. I will choose the human when the god would scorch, and I will choose the god when the human would falter for smallness. I will keep the hinge oiled with mercy." I will not open a gate that should stay shut, nor lock a door men should pass. I will be counted last when counting would make me first. I will listen to the cold until it tells me to let the living live. I will listen to the fire until it warns me of my own hunger. The key sang again, louder this time, and it was not a man's hearing that caught it. The note traveled through the cavities of his body and found each place it needed to know, making each one into a small, necessary bell. When it ended, there was a ringing in his bones that did not fade. It stayed as a hum. A new silence nested inside the old. Melisandre exhaled, long and slow. "You have made a thing that did not want to be made," she said. "Not because the hinge resented your hand, it has no resentments, but because the world will attempt to use you up now that you have offered yourself. It always uses up those who offer." "I can be used," Jon said. "I will not be used up." Nyra's mouth flashed in approval. "Good words," she said, and then, fiercely, to the gate. "Listen to him. He tells truth when he can, and when he cannot he is silent. This is better than most men." In the days that followed, those words proved themselves not with drama but with the slow, unremarkable accretion of acts any man could share. Jon gave his meat away when scarce. He stood cold sentry to let a boy sleep whose eyelids had betrayed him. He split wood with a deliberation that would have made any craftsman nod. He listened with attention when men told him their wives had been pregnant and then not. He let himself be interrupted by a child, not because she had anything important to say, but because interruptions are sometimes the only power the powerless possess, and denying that power weakens the one who denies it more than it corrects the one who exercises it. News from the south accumulated like snow on a sill. A skim at first, a drift later, then a weight that wants to become a slide if not watched. Winterfell flickered between hands in rumor, if not in fact. A girl with red hair was a question again. A man who had made cruelty into a style was both dead and alive depending on which fire you listened to. Banners moved as they have always moved when the wind of advantage changes direction. Jon refused to let any of it be the wind that turned him. He would go when the time said go and not when insults prodded his pride. He did not doubt that men called him faithless for his delay and other men called him foolish for wanting to go at all. He ate both judgments as a man eats poor bread and made strength of it as much as he could. On a morning when the light had a blue glazed quality that promises either beauty or disaster, the forest sent a sound. It was not a horn. It was as if something old had breathed out for the first time in a long while. Men stopped what they were doing all at once, as if a single hand had been raised and asked for quiet. Jon knew the sound. He had heard it once only in his dreams. It was the dragging of a cloak across stone. It was the sound a river makes when it remembers it will be ice again and is not afraid. He took the key. He did not tense. He stood in the gate's chamber with Nyra on one side and Melisandre on the other, with Davos behind him like a hand on his back, with Ed at the mouth counting heads because men must be counted in all moments, even those moments when it seems beyond counting. The hinge vibrated before he held it up, eager, if such a word can be said of a thing. The ice did not break. The air did not darken. Instead, across the glass floor, lines that had not been visible began to reveal themselves, delicate veins, the sorts of lines a leaf makes when held up to fire. They arranged themselves into a pattern he had seen at the heart of the key. Not identical, nothing repeats like that in the world unless it is a lie, but sympathetic, a cousin pattern that would accept a greeting from a guest with the right manners. Jon lifted the key and spoke the word that had entered his bones like a truth. The room seemed to nod, the way a giant might nod on the verge of laughter and change the weather thereby. A breath of air issued from the seam. It was neither warm nor cold. It was recognition itself. "What is it?" Ed asked, because even his fine cynicism had run out, leaving him only ordinary curiosity. "Someone is coming," Jon said, "and we will decide whether to welcome them or to teach them to be welcome. That is what we are for." "What if it is the dead?" one of the men asked, voicing the reasonable terror that sits in every human mouth. "Then we will teach them to be welcome only by being what they hate," Jon said. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. "We will be alive, and we will be many, and we will count ourselves in a way that makes their counting useless." The seam held. The breath continued. It was the preface to a book that not one man among them knew how to read. Jon lowered the key. He turned, and in turning, felt the world situate itself around him, as if the room had been crooked until he stood and then became straight. He did not feel like a god in the way men imagine gods are, swaggering about with lightning in their teeth. He felt like a knot, as he had said, a reliable knot that would hold even when the ship strained and the wind changed, holding not by force but by comprehension of where tension wanted to go and how to become its friend. He climbed the stairs back into the weather all men share. Snow began again when he opened the door to the yard, the small fine flakes that hang in the air between falls as if undecided. He raised his face and let them find it. Each flake was complex, a tiny architecture of decisions that water makes when cold is around. He thought of the South and of Winterfell and of the trees and the old stone, of a father who had said little and shown much, of brothers and sisters who had been scattered like seeds by a careless hand and perhaps would take root again. He did not pray. He did not know to whom to pray. He set his palm on the hilt of Longclaw and his other hand on the wrapped key and stood another small while in the calm that comes before any storm that is honest about itself. "I'm going to Winterfell," he told Davos later. "Not for advice nor for absolution. Not tomorrow, not today, but soon. We will go not as beggars for favor, but as men who carry fire and cold on leashes and will use them on behalf of the living. We will go with wildlings and crows and farmers' sons and the daughters who have learned to string a bow because there were no sons left. We will go with a gate in our pocket. We will go with the wall at our back like a friend we can bring along by speaking a word." Davos nodded. "Aye," he said. "You sound like a fool and like a leader. The line between those is a hair, and the hair is always wet. I'll be with you when you slip." "I know," Jon said, and in his mouth even the admission carried a kind of comfort. "I expect you to laugh when I make a fool of myself." "Oh, I will," Davos said, with the gravity of a man attending a funeral. "Good," Jon said. "We need laughter as much as we need food." "More," Ed offered from the doorway. "Food fills the belly one day. Laughter fills the mind and makes it think it can last another. I've seen men starve with full bowls for lack of anything to smile at." "Then let's give them something," Tormund roared as he joined them, carrying a haunch of something that had once outrun many men and had now accepted the end of that contest. "Let's give them the sight of crows and free folk walking in the same tracks without tripping each other. We'll give the South the oddest army it has ever seen," Davos said dryly. "And perhaps for once the oddness will be to our advantage." Jon looked around him. The table, the shelves, the worn place on the floor where men had paced out their troubles and worn them smooth. He felt the hush that lived at the edges of even the busiest rooms and knew he would carry that hush wherever he went. It was not the hush of an ending. It was the hush of something waiting to be named. He would not be the one to give it all its names. He would only be the one to insist that names be given fairly, that nothing be called by the wrong word merely because a wrong word was convenient to a lord who wanted sleep and not the truth. He said nothing grand. He reached for his cloak and he fastened it. He slid the key into the leather pouch that hung near his heart. He whistled for Ghost and the wolf came as if he had been waiting on the other side of the door, pretending not to in case any man thought he had grown soft. He glanced once at the fire and once at the door, and in both glances the same promise held itself lightly. He would not squander the living. He would not spare the dead if sparing them would harm the living. He would be the hinge. When night came and the torches hissed and the men grew quiet around their bowls, singing badly under their breath to remind themselves that they still could, Jon stood at the window slit and watched the sky. A smear of green drifted there some nights, a slow river in the upper air. It had not shown itself in years. On that night it showed. The men loved it without saying so. The light moved like a word he might learn to read if he did not hurry. He kept his hands at his sides. He did not reach for it. He let it write itself and trusted that when the time came he would know what it said. On the morrow there would be arguments and ration counts and a horse gone sideways and a boy punished gently for having stolen because he had not yet learned how to ask. On the morrow, he would put his weight where weight was needed. But tonight he let the green light slide over the white wolf's fur. He let the world be beautiful and unbeautiful, a balance that did not desire his opinion. Paletus, the wind might have said, and if it did, it said it with affection, not adulation. He turned from the window and lay down on the narrow bed that had been his when he was only one thing and was his still now that he was two. Now that he would have to learn every hour how to make two one without causing harm. He closed his eyes. The stitches in his chest did not pull. They held. He night bent around the keep as if listening to breath. Somewhere below, a seam waited. When sleep took him, it did not take him like a thief. It came like a guest invited at last and given the chair beside the fire. He dreamed, if dream it could be called, of a road that climbed the spine of a great beast sleeping under snow. The beast did not stir when he walked. It did not need to. He had promised to be careful, and the beast understood the meaning of careful. In the distance, Winterfell's torches made their low constellations. The dead counted. The living, each small spark of them, began to count themselves in a new way, a way that would count long after numbers were no use to anyone. He stepped forward and the snow accepted his feet without protest. He was a man and he was something more, and being both would be what saved them if anything could. And in the chamber under the wall, in the clean air between glass floor and glass ceiling, the hinge waited, content now that it had heard the thing it was made for spoken at last. It did not think. It held. It did not judge. It measured. It remembered the forge and the dragon breath that had tempered it. It remembered hands like claws and hands like men's. It felt the breath of a god not made by prayer move near and did not flinch. It sat as hinges do, dreaming nothing, prepared for everything, knowing that the doors it once held had been shattered and that it now held a door no man could see until the day it would be needed. It waited because waiting is sometimes the greatest work there is.